A call for you here. Cllr Maureen Byrne is with us now, has been gauging concerns around the Haverhill area. Maureen, good morning.
Oh, good morning.
Thank you for joining us. You're through to Dr Marsh. What's your question?
Oh, yes, I've got a few questions for Dr Marsh.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm not in my office at home where I've got all the information collated, but what I would like to remind Dr Marsh is that Haverhill has an ambulance, or we're supposed to have an ambulance. That ambulance is not very often located or sited in Haverhill, and I have a whole list of complaints where ambulances that have been called to urgent incidents have taken an hour, 2 hours and 3 hours to arrive. Now, this is totally unacceptable. I have been given an opportunity that I'm going to meet with a senior manager from the ambulance service. I've given them a whole list and a range of questions that they're going to obviously research for me. But what I want to know is that I've just heard what you've said about paramedics and staffing issues. I'm more concerned about the opportunity for people that have an ambulance that's supposed to be used for their town that is very, very, very rarely available.
Where is it then?
It can be cited anywhere but Haverhill.
Yeah. No, firstly, I'm really sorry that patients are waiting far too long for ambulances, and that's a problem that I've inherited, and that's why I've been drafted in to try and help reduce those long delays. Of course, once we get those additional new staff operational, driving our ambulances, our response cars across the county, then the ambulances will be able to predominantly work in the areas for which they are originally based. But as you'll appreciate, where you've got other 999 calls waiting for ambulances, we'll always do the best we can and send our crews to those patients that are waiting. And there is a very dynamic process of the Haverhill ambulance working elsewhere, and then ambulances from other towns in and around Suffolk being drafted into Haverhill for dealing with their emergencies, and that's why you get the delays that you've referred to, Councillor. And I am very sorry. We're working hard to reduce those delays by increasing the number of staff that we're recruiting.
Well, another question I want to ask, and you may not be able to answer this, I want to know how often you backfill, because the information that I've been able to research is that very often there's no backfilling. Now, you're talking about hoping that when you get the staff that you want, things are going to improve.
Yeah.
The staff need ambulances, and ambulances need to be sited where they're available. Now, I've heard that Ely recently have been given a priority to our ambulance and other ambulances because they've had 2 fatalities in the high street within the last 6 months. So you seem to be prioritising where there's been, obviously, an unfortunate fatality, and that leaves other areas very vulnerable.
What about when the Haverhill ambulance goes off somewhere, then how do you backfill behind there?
It's very difficult because, to be honest with you, the bottom line is we don't have enough staff, we don't have enough ambulances. That's the bottom line. And to be honest with you, most of the time our crews go from one case to the next, regardless of whether it's in Haverhill, Ely or
this was an issue once
anywhere
before,
else.
because you could have an ambulance, say, in Haverhill that's called to the next town. The next call then may be even further away from Haverhill, and so...
Absolutely right.
So it goes further and further away. But
absolutely right.
Is the flip side someone coming in to cover if needed?
Well, if there are other ambulances available, then we will move those crews around to provide emergency cover where that's possible. But the simple fact of the matter is we don't have enough staff to be able to...
So you can't afford to have an ambulance just sitting there waiting for something in an area. It has to go off
to deal with the next 999 call that's waiting wherever that is. And unfortunately, we don't have the luxury very often to have the available crews to then move into those areas to backfill.
I'm really frustrated. I'm not angry, but I'm frustrated. Let me give you an example. I was with a woman she's 70, 72, that got knocked down recently. We phoned for an ambulance. We had to leave her laying on the floor. The weather wasn't very good. It was very, very cold, but people were very good and looked after her. The police arrived. They then ran the ambulance service again. Still no ambulance. When the ambulance eventually turned up, about an hour and 20 minutes later, we asked the ambulance driver, "What time did you get this call?" "Oh," he said, "I got it 25 minutes ago. I was at West Suffolk Hospital." Now, that is totally unacceptable. This woman had been knocked down. She was laying in the road. We were terrified of moving her because she'd got osteoporosis. She was frightened that she'd broken her hip because of the pain. This is unacceptable.
I completely agree with you. I share your frustration. Absolutely, I absolutely share your frustration. And so do my frontline staff.
Well, what's the point of Haverhill having an ambulance when Haverhill residents need an ambulance, whether it's the Haverhill ambulance or another ambulance, we have such long waiting times?
Because
unacceptable waiting time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. They're completely unacceptable. But the fact I've tried to explain, it's simply because we don't have enough staff, we don't have enough paramedics, and that's why we're recruiting over 500 additional staff this year, a new emergency ambulance fleet, so that we can reduce those delays. We're not holding on to calls because we just don't want to send an ambulance, or it's because it's an ambulance from a different area. It's simply we don't have enough. But the improvements that we're putting in place will reduce those delays. But it will take time to recruit and train those staff. And I'm sorry that the lady had to wait so long for an ambulance, but you can be absolutely assured that our frontline staff are working as hard as they can to get to as many patients as quickly as possible.
Well, unless you backfill, things aren't going to improve. It's as simple as that.
I agree.
But I've said all I can say, really, and I'm hoping that when I have the meeting with this senior manager of the ambulance service, that they'll be able to give me some more information. I've left them with quite a substantial list of...
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, and you are happy to address these kind of concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. I do know about this because I know that this lady wrote in, the councillor wrote in, and I don't know when the meeting's to be held, but I am aware of the meeting, and that manager will liaise with you and set out the improvements we're making in Haverhill.